By New Year's Eve 1979, Vladislav Tretiak was one of the most famous hockey players on the planet. He had been the Soviet national team's starter since his teens, and backstopped it to 2 Olympic and 7 World Championship gold medals. He had been selected as the Soviet League first-team All-Star every year since 1971. The wild thing about it all was that, at age 28, he was only just entering his prime. Simply put, he was widely considered the best player not in the NHL. Still, he had his skeptics. 4 years earlier to the day, Tretiak and the Soviet Red Army played the Habs in an exhibition match that some considered the finest game of the decade. The Canadians had badly outplayed the Soviets, outshooting them 38-13, but it ended in a 3-3 draw. Tretiak was the equalizer. Still, Steve Shutt, who had a backdoor open net chance bounce over his stick, felt that Tretiak had just been lucky. But by the last day of the decade, the Habs were still left without any doubt at all about his ability. Once again badly outshot 35-14, Tretiak held the fort against all odds. "I wasn't pleased with half the team," he said. "We could have played much better, but they played for all 3 periods." In the third, the Red Army's 2-1 lead evaporated. Steve Shutt would have scored a hat-trick if but for 1 goal that was scored with a high stick. Habs won 4-2. They outshot the Red Army 13-3 in the first. The score could easily have been 3-0 by then. Habs defenseman Serge Savard revealed that the Habs had been thinking about the game for 3 or 4 weeks leading up to it. "We knew we were going to play the best amateur team in the world," he said, "and that we had to give our best, period." On April 23, 1983, Savard was named the 12th GM in Habs history. Each of the 4 most recent Habs GMs had won Stanley Cup titles, though his immediate predecessor, Irving Grundman, had inherited a great team at the end of a dynasty. Grundman was hated by the Montreal media. He made questionable trades and passed on Denny Savard with the first pick in the 1980 draft in favor of big Westerner Doug Wickenheiser. Anyway, Serge Savard inherited a team with an uncertain goaltending picture. Rick Wamsley had been a top prospect, but failed to live up to the expectations of a team that had enjoyed all-world goaltending for most of its history. The club hadn't had a legend in net since Ken Dryden's surprising retirement at the end of the 1979 season. That New Year's, the Red Army played the Habs again. Tretiak blanked them 5-0 and received a standing ovation for doing it. He'd blanked the Nordiques just a day earlier. Before the Habs game, Tretiak mentioned casually how he'd one day like to play for the famous Montreal Canadiens. He unintentionally created a buzz. Mobbed by fans, then cheered as one of their own, Tretiak later walked back his statement. What he meant to say was that if he played in the NHL, Montreal was the team he'd like to play for. At the entry draft that June, Savard took him at his word and called his name. To that point, no Soviet-trained Russian-born player had ever been permitted to play in North America. It was a Hail Mary play. At 31 years of age, the Soviets considered Tretiak to be old. The national team had a habit of dropping players at around age 32 to 34 and transitioning them to coaching. With the Sarajevo Olympics coming up that winter, it was conceivable that the national team would drop him afterwards. It wasn't beyond the scope of possibility that the Soviets would allow him to play in America once his usefulness to the national cause had been fulfilled. Soviet national team captain Vyacheslav Starshinov had been given permission to play pro hockey in Japan. Vladimir Shadrin had just finished his 4th year there. Tretiak was a special talent. He could conceivably enjoy 5 more years of dominance. In fact, though he'd been the starting netminder with the Central Red Army since 1969-70, he'd seen 3 distinct generations of teammates come and go. And yet, he had just enjoyed his finest season with a 1.46 goals against average. The price was just a 6th-round pick, Montreal's 9th selection, 143rd overall, well worth the risk. Savard didn't mince words. He's the best goalie in the world. He said many times that he would like to play in the NHL, and he wanted to play in Montreal. Well, we have to take him in the draft if we want to have his rights. Savard's plan was to spend the following season negotiating with Tretiak's Soviet handlers and allow the goalie to star in the 1984 Olympics. Savard's pitch was that Tretiak coming over and dominating would score a propaganda win for the Soviets. Of course, there was always Plan B. The Stasnys had successfully defected only a few years earlier. The idea was in the air. That February, Savard flew to Sarajevo with a $1.5 million 3-year contract in his hand. Jerry Grundman, a special representative with the Habs, delivered the contract to Marat Granov, chairman of the Soviet Sports Committee. Reportedly, Granov gave the contract to Tretiak. It was a risky proposition. There was no way of knowing if such a gesture might hurt the netminder. Could it be interpreted as a sign that Tretiak had been in secret communication with the club? Would his loyalties fall under scrutiny? Jacques Olivier, Canadian Minister of Fitness and Amateur Sports, hedged. We assured Mr. Granov we don't want to interfere with the internal policies of the Soviet Union. Dealing with Soviet officials was like walking on eggshells, especially after the Stastny incident. After being handed the contract offer, Tretiak's only reply was that he was an officer in the Soviet Army and was looking forward to coaching young Soviet goaltenders upon his retirement. The truth was that Tretiak's father-in-law was a colonel in the Soviet Army, and therefore, Tretiak would never be allowed to leave. It's the ultimate what-if question. What if Tretiak had been given permission to play in Canada? He'd been playing against NHL competition fairly regularly for more than a decade. We don't have to wonder about whether or not he would have played well. He was already a superstar. At least, he was in Montreal. But what happens to Montreal's mid to late 80s Cup window? What happens to the Oilers dynasty? What happens to Patrick Waugh? When he was hired as goaltending coach of the Chicago Blackhawks in 1990, Ed Belfour said none of the Hawks could beat him in practice. He looked so good that Mike Keenan wanted to start him. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Sometime in the multiverse, things worked out that way. In this one, we'll never know. But it's fun to stop and wonder about. In 1981, Montreal Canadiens management combed over all 21 NHL clubs. They only had one shot at this. They were trying to make a bet. They looked at rosters, ownership, and management. Who was stable, who wasn't? Who was young, who was old? Who had a chance to improve over the next couple of seasons, and who were on the decline? They looked at everything they could think of. After the analysis, they came to a satisfying conclusion. By the end of the 1984 season, the Hartford Whalers would be the worst team in the league. Then, the Habs targeted them. At stake were the rights to draft local phenom Mario Lemieux once he came of age. According to legend, the Habs had successfully attempted the move before, when Guy Lafleur was available. We went into that story in some detail in a previous video. Lemieux hailed from the suburb of Ville-Émard, and the Habs would be damned if they let a local get away from them. So on December 21st, the Habs traded oft-maligned center Pierre LaRouche and their first-round pick in 1984 to Hartford for Hartford's first and second-round picks in 1984, plus an exchange of thirds in 85. LaRouche was something of an enigma. He had all the talent in the world. In juniors, he set the QMJHL single-season record with 251 points. In 1976, he became the youngest NHL player in history to score 50 goals and 100 points with Pittsburgh. But by 1979, he couldn't escape Habs coach Scotty Bowman's doghouse. He was a healthy scratch most nights, and still finished the year with 22 points in 36 games. The next season, with Bowman having shuffled off to Buffalo, LaRouche hit the 50-goal mark once again. But 1981 had been a bit of a down year, and people would understand if he needed a change of scenery. Nobody would think twice if Montreal shopped him around. With his 50-goal potential, he was certainly worth a first-rounder, right? He immediately helped in Hartford, but not enough to make the playoffs. The season after that, he ran into similar problems as he had in Montreal, and by the end of the 1983 season, the Whalers decided to cut bait. But hey, Hartford still had Montreal's first and second pick in the next draft. On a side note, if Montreal had identified Washington as the potentially worst team in the league by 1984, there's no way they would have traded Rod Langway to them. And you never know, maybe Montreal gets their man. Meanwhile, Mario developed into the best prospect since Gretzky. At 6'4", 200 pounds, his size, vision, and pinpoint accuracy with the puck were already world-class. In 1983, he scored 184 points as a 17-year-old, then added 32 points in just 12 playoff games before being eliminated by the Jacques Lemaire-coached expansion team in Longueuil. As a late birthday, he would have to stay in juniors one extra year, even though he was probably already ready to dominate the pros. Before the season started, Lemieux's agent, Gus Badali, promised that if he could beat Guy Lafleur's record of 130 goals in a season, he would get him $1 million a year contract. That year, he vaporized LaRouche's record by netting 282 points and shattered Lafleur's goals record with 133. He was a grown man among boys. In the playoffs, he put up an astonishing 52 points while cruising to a league title. Oilers' brilliant director of player personnel Barry Fraser said, "Mario Lemieux is the most talented player in the draft by a mile." Detroit GM Jimmy DeVellino echoed the sentiment. "There's no question about it, he's the number one ranked player." "It's an opportunity that arrives maybe once every 10 years, Nordique's president Marcel Aubout said. "Our scouts are unanimous that he's the closest thing to Gretzky. I would compare him to Gretzky," Penguins Quebec scout Albert Mandanici said, "but Gretzky is probably faster." Now, because of the promise his agent had made him, he expected to get paid better than Gretzky. Hartford finished fifth from last in the standings that year. The Habs had airballed on their bet. The Canadiens weren't the only team that had seen Mario coming. After nearly eliminating the Islanders in the first round of the 82 playoffs, the Penguins had plummeted down the standings. For more on that story, see our previous video. Attendance cratered from an already paltry 11,000 to 8,000 a game. The Penguins were in a precarious financial situation. The team had already declared bankruptcy once in 1975. Their new owner, Ed DeBartolo Jr., couldn't absorb losses forever. Buzz about the team moving to Hamilton, Ontario was getting too loud to ignore. One of the reasons things were so bad was that GM Baz Bastian had a habit of selling first-round picks. The Penguins had been a middling team at best, while trading away their first-round picks in the 77, 78, 79, and 81 drafts. If Montreal had identified Pittsburgh as the worst team by 1984, they could easily have acquired the pick. But nobody could have seen just how far the team would fall in 1981. In March of 1983, Bastian lost his life in a car accident, and coach Eddie Johnston was promoted to GM. By pure chance, the Penguins still held their 1984 first. Lemieux represented a light at the end of the tunnel. Johnston emptied out the roster that year, selling it all in a neck-and-neck race with the equally inept New Jersey Devils for last place. Norris winner Randy Carlyle was traded for a draft pick in futures. When rookie goalie Roberto Romano heated up, he was sent down to the Baltimore Skipjacks. And through it all, Johnston held on to that first-round pick like his life depended on it, because the life of the Penguins did. Attendance had bottomed out to 6,000 a night, with no sellouts. The team was hanging by a financial thread. Johnston had made an incredibly risky and desperate gamble. But when it all sifted out, Pittsburgh had secured last place and the first pick in the draft. The Habs and the Nordiques both tried to make blockbuster trades with the Penguins for that pick. The return would have netted Pittsburgh mountains of cash, draft capital, and immediate roster help. Lou Nanne, GM of the Minnesota North Stars, offered all 12 of the team's 1984 draft picks. Boston had also thrown their hat into the ring. But there was nothing any team could offer the Penguins that could help them more than drafting Mario Lemieux would. The influence that Lemieux is going to have on our franchise is something we need, Penguins GM Eddie Johnston said. It won't just be the Penguins. It will be Mario Lemieux and the Pittsburgh Penguins. Knowing that the Penguins held the pick and that they were going to take him, Lemieux and Badali engaged in early contract negotiations. Lemieux was sorely disappointed with what he heard. Badali had promised $1 million. Pittsburgh couldn't offer that. They simply didn't have the money. Contract talks hit an impasse. On draft day 1984, some 3,000 Pens diehards made the trip to Montreal to see it in person. It was the first NHL draft to be nationally televised. Thousands more watched on closed-circuit TV at the Igloo, including season ticket holders. When Eddie Johnston called his name, Lemieux stood and waved, and then just sat there. He refused to go downstairs and shake Johnston's hand, or even receive the Penguin sweater. When asked, he said, "I don't think they want me enough to go downstairs." At the screening, one unrenewed season ticket holder stood up and shouted, "I'll sign when Lemieux signs." Lemieux was acting on Badali's advice. The gap involved a clause that would increase his salary for any increase in attendance at the Igloo. One day the money would flow, but Lemieux himself would have to be the one to turn the tap. That was understood from the outset. Years later, he expressed regret for how he acted as an 18-year-old. He was doing what he was told was best for him. When he finally signed a week later, his base salary was less than what he was expecting, but it was an investment. Lemieux signed a 2-year deal worth $600,000 per year with a $150,000 signing bonus. At the time, it was the highest dollar contract in team history. Team officials said it was the best thing to happen to the club since its inception. They weren't wrong. Those in Pittsburgh who cared enough to watch knew what a special player they had at his first intra-squad scrimmage. Lemieux's first goal in a Penguins practice jersey was so dazzling, it caused one onlooker to burst out and say, "Our savior has arrived." Johnston had been through it before, as a player in 1966. His Boston Bruins teammates were skeptical of the teenager who people were saying was going to save the franchise. Johnston and the other veterans curbed their enthusiasm until they saw what Bobby Orr could do against NHL players. After the second practice, they were sold. Mario didn't have to wait that long. He would famously score a goal in his first shift in his first game in Boston. At the home opener, 15,741 came out to watch Mario Lemieux and the Pittsburgh Penguins for the first time that counted. By the final tally, attendance clocked in around 10,000 per game on the year. Still low, but up by about 4,000 from the tank year. Attendance would increase year over year until the limited capacity Civic Center was filled with over 15,000 souls routinely. The tap was officially running. Before we get into our next story, let me preemptively apologize for mispronouncing any names. In 1944, Hakan Loob's grandfather faced hell or high water, so he made a choice. He put himself, his wife, and his 4 children on a boat and left his native Estonia as it withered under Russian occupation. The destination was the Swedish island of Gotland. The family settled there in the village of Liut. An ice rink was built nearby around 20 years later. Son Paul's children Hakan and Peter practically lived there. They would both one day make the NHL. But by 1988, Hakan faced a dilemma of his own. He'd worked in Canada for 5 years. His son Henrik was 7 years old. Henrik was becoming increasingly acclimatized to the local culture. 2 younger children would also soon be going through the Canadian school system. Hakan was 28 years old. He had at least 5 more strong years left in him. Flames GM Cliff Fletcher wanted to keep him and offered an enormous contract. $750,000 a year, 3 times his current salary. But if the family didn't return home, the children would no longer be Swedish, but Canadian. Before long, they would never be able to return. To make matters harder, the professional life had never been better. Loob had just done something no other Swede had ever done before. In 1982-83, Loob put up numbers no other Swede had been able to top. He scored 42 goals and 76 points in just 36 games. Both are records that have never been broken. Mind you, the landscape was different back then. Matchups mattered more, with fewer truly excellent players in the Swedish Elite League. If your top line could step out against the opposing third line, the other club was in big trouble. Loob was definitely a top-line player in Sweden, playing for Farjestad BK Karlstad. Still, the landscape was the same for every Swedish player, and he outproduced all of them. In the summer of 1980, Loob received a care package in the mail. Inside was a Calgary Flames jersey with his name on the back. When he opened it, he didn't even know what it meant. It turned out that he'd been drafted. A number of Swedish players had gone overseas and made a decent show of it. He wasn't the biggest guy, but maybe his skill could keep him afloat. In 1983, he started thinking out loud about the possibility of giving it a try. That's when the outside voices got louder. You're going to get eaten alive. You're never going to make it. You had a great year in Sweden, but it's not the same. Loob figured if he didn't make it, he could always just come back. Besides, Mats Naslund had gone over, and he was even smaller. As far as anybody could tell, he was still walking upright, too. 85 players had been invited to Flames training camp in 1983. The Flames were desperate to stay competitive with their cross-provincial rivals in Edmonton. The Oilers had just made the Stanley Cup final and were odds-on favorites to return. The Flames, meanwhile, looked deep at right wing. During the past season, Lanny McDonald scored 66 from the right side, a ridiculous total. It probably didn't help that Fletcher had called Loob the Swedish Wayne Gretzky to the local press. Loob dazzled his teammates with unprecedented levels of skill. He did things with the puck they'd never seen before. In his first exhibition game, he scored 5 goals. His coaches were amazed. When camp had broken, he'd made the cut. By the end of the season, he'd scored 30 and made the NHL All-Rookie team. In 1987-88, he scored 5 hat tricks, including 3 in the month of March. That month alone, he scored 15 goals and 32 points in 15 games as he went over 100 points on the year. In April, he scored his 50th of the season, the only Swede to ever reach that milestone. His new line mate that season, Joe Nieuwendyk, also hit 50 goals and won the Calder Trophy as league's top rookie. Nieuwendyk gave Loob's nifty playmaking much of the credit. After 5 NHL seasons, things were looking better than ever. So then it came as quite a shock when he told Fletcher that the next season would be his last. So Fletcher threw the bag at him, nearly $1 million a year, but Loob still refused. Family took precedence. Nobody could fault him. The money he'd made in Calgary was far more than he could ever have made playing hockey in Sweden, but it wasn't enough to last forever. Loob figured he had about 4 or 5 years to make the kinds of professional contacts he would need for his post-playing career. There was a true sense of urgency. The next season, the Loob, Nieuwendyk, Gary Roberts line scored 100 goals between them and were once again one of the most dangerous in the NHL. Nieuwendyk hit 50 goals again, and Loob finished second in team scoring with 85 points. But in the Stanley Cup final, the combo was ice cold. Most of the Flames were. Calgary had little answer to the Montreal Canadiens' world-class defensive players. Only Al MacInnis, Doug Gilmour, Joel Otto, and Joey Mullen stayed productive. In Game 3, with the series tied at 1 apiece, the series shifted to the storied Montreal Forum. Loob was posterized on the double overtime winner by Ryan Walter and finished the night with a -3 rating. But he wasn't playing poorly, and he was desperate to go out on top. In the 6th game of the series, also in Montreal, the outcome was still in doubt. Calgary had regained the advantage in the series, but the Habs had just tied the game. Only one time in the 64-year history of the Montreal Forum had the home team lost the deciding game of the Stanley Cup Finals, and it was the Maroons who had lost that one. For more on that story, see video number 21. In his first shift after the Montreal tie goal, Loob started the play that broke it, corralling the loose puck and speeding into the attacking zone. Loob sent the puck over to Nieuwendyk on his left wing, who sent a cross-ice feed to Lanny on the right flank, who laser-beamed it past Patrick Waugh. The goal didn't hold up as the winner, but the Flames maintained the lead for the rest of the night. The Flames won the Stanley Cup. In the locker room, his jersey soaked in champagne, Loob confirmed to reporters that he had just played his final NHL game. Back in Sweden, Loob received another care package from the Flames. He sold aluminum siding during the day. He would drop his kids off at school, work during the day, then attend practice with Farjestads, then back home to say goodnight to the children. Inside the package were miniature replica Stanley Cup and Clarence Campbell Bowl trophies and 2 Stanley Cup rings, one for him and one for his wife. While he was away, the competition in Sweden's professional ranks had leveled up. Most clubs were able to deploy 4 useful lines. Still, Loob remained a cut above. He played on Farjestad's top line with fellow former NHLers Bent Gustafsson and Magnus Rupe to form the most feared trio in Sweden. Gustafsson would win the Gold Helmet Award as Best Swedish League Player as voted on by the players. Loob would win the same award in each of the next 2 years. He retired in 1996, a legend in his home country, arguably a top 10 performer all time. Hockey Hall of Fame voters don't seem to put much stock into European League totals or records, but Loob became a charter member of Sweden's Triple Gold Club along with Naslund and Thomas Jansson when they helped Tre Kroner to an Olympic gold medal in 1994. His seasons of 42 goals in Sweden and 50 in the NHL remain Swedish records, as is his 76 points. Due to the NHL talent drain and the amounts of money offered to top hockey players in America, it's unlikely any homegrown sniper sticks around long enough in his native territory to break it. His time in the NHL was sometimes streaky, but he was nearly a point-per-game player in his 6 years there, despite playing through a shoulder injury that required surgery in 1987. He was inducted into the IIHF and Swedish Hockey Halls of Fame. When the WHA merged with the NHL in 1979, 2 WHA clubs were left out of the deal. One of them was the Birmingham Bulls. Bulls executive Gilles Léger wasn't out of a job for long. He was hired by the Quebec Nordiques, one of the merging clubs, to serve as Director of Player Development. It was an inspired choice. The Nordiques wanted to build a team that could challenge their cross-provincial rivals, the Montreal Canadiens, for talent. But outside the draft, their prospects of being able to do so were thin. Léger had a knack for attracting great, even Hall of Fame talents in a saturated market, and didn't let any obstacle, legal or otherwise, stand in his way. 5 years earlier, Léger had orchestrated the first, and to date most successful defection of a communist-trained player. And not just any player. Václav Nedomansky was a star for the Czechoslovakia national team. The particulars of how Léger brought Nedomansky over to North America were treated like state secrets, because they essentially were. Like a hockey Woodward and Bernstein, rumors hinted at payoffs, midnight meetings in the dark, wiretaps, and a shadowy broker known only as 007. The Great Escape took place in Switzerland, while Big Ned was on a scheduled vacation, with no one from the party watching over his shoulder. the next potential defector would face a tougher road. Liut had identified his next communist target by as early as November 1976. By the time he ganged up with the Nordiques, he'd had over 2.5 years to plan the hockey heist of the century. At the 1980 Olympic Games at Lake Placid, Nordiques brass couldn't get within 100 feet of the Stasnys. Liut had begun his cloak and dagger operation in earnest after being hired by the Nordiques. Internally, it was called the European Project. He kicked tires on the Stasnys at every international tournament. Czech authorities were aware of him, and weary, but they didn't know about Agent 007. 3 of the 4 Stastny brothers were participating for Team Czechoslovakia: Marian, Peter, and Anton. Peter in particular was a special talent. He'd been earmarked as a future world-class superstar since his coming-out party as a 19-year-old at the 1976 World Championships. The brothers insisted that Marian was the best of them. He was the one they'd have to leave behind. The trio scored 16 goals and 33 points in 6 games during the Olympics. Czechoslovak athletes at the Olympics were under heavy guard. Liut managed to send an intermediary through to dangle the prospect of freedom to the Stasnys. The Stastny brothers had never agreed with the regime. The 2 eldest brothers, Vladimir and Marian, had actually risked their lives to protest in 1968, while tanks still rolled through the streets. Young Peter told his father that he'd be out there too if given the chance. He dreamed of living and playing abroad. While traveling with the national team, he would sneak issues of the hockey news back home. He even patterned his game on a rougher, more NHL-ready style. But the prospect of leaving wasn't as simple as it sounded. Even if one managed to evade watchful authorities, there was a real cost of escape back home for those left behind. Family would be punished in their place. Because of this real associated cost, none of the brothers were ready to just drop everything and go. At least, not yet. Peter's wife, Darina, was pregnant. He hated the thought of his child being brought up in a system ran by the communists. The thought that the family values and ideas he would teach the child would be warped and undermined by the government was sickening. The call came from a post office payphone in Innsbruck, Austria. The 2 youngest brothers, Peter and Anton, were on vacation there. They were interested in coming to Canada. Within hours of the call, Liut and Nordiques president Marcel Aubu were on a plane for Austria. Marian was with the brothers, but he wasn't ready to leave. On top of being a hockey star, he was also a successful lawyer and the most fluent of the brothers in English. The 5 men engaged in an impromptu contract negotiation. Considering the cost of what they were about to do, Peter and Anton didn't come cheap. Marian looked over the agreement and approved it. It would cost the Nordiques nearly $500,000 a year, but when the meeting was over, they had 2 Stasnys on the books. Aubu told Marian that he was more than welcome to join his brothers, but he refused. If it were at all possible, he would wait for official approval to join the club. The mechanics of the plan were elaborate. As the Czechoslovak team boarded the team bus to leave Innsbruck, Anton, Peter, and Darina would walk past it and into 2 idling vehicles. The brothers would be driven to Vienna in a red Mercedes by Aubu and Liut. Darina would go with the mysterious Mr. 007. Once in Vienna, the Stasnys were filed away in a room at a Holiday Inn under Aubu's name, while Aubu and Liut worked out a plan for safe passage at the Canadian Embassy. Czechoslovak secret police spotted the Nordique officials on the way and attempted to intercept them, but they slipped through to the embassy. After arrangements were made, things got messy. Canadian officials evaded Czech police like it was choreographed by William Friedkin. They tore down sidewalks to avoid gridlock and drove the wrong way down one-way streets, rifle-toting communist officials at their heels all the time. When they arrived at the airport, Austrian police escorted the quintet to a plane bound for Montreal. When the plane arrived on August 25, 1980, the quintet was greeted with questions from a waiting mob of reporters. Aubu said, "Had I known the dangers, I never would have done it." He wiped his brow and continued, Had I known that I'd be risking my life and the lives of others, I never would have done it. When Marion arrived back home, it was to a barrage of questions, but not from the press. He was interrogated by police. That first season was legendary. Peter destroyed Bryan Trottier's rookie record with 39 goals and 109 points. His 70 assists are still the rookie high standard. Only Teemu Selanne has ever scored more points as a rookie. The brothers would sometimes exasperate Nordique's coach Michel Bergeron. Peter would enter the zone uncontested and would stop up and not even look at the net. It's as if he was saying, "Where's my brother?" Then he'd dish it to Anton. Sometimes Anton would score, sometimes he wouldn't. But Anton proved to be no slouch, with 39 goals of his own and 85 points. The two performed in lockstep. Each one knew where the other would be. Behind the back passes, tap-in goals. In back-to-back games at Vancouver and Washington, both brothers had hat tricks. Quebec improved by 17 points in the standings and made the NHL playoffs for the first time. Back home, however, the atmosphere was far less celebratory. Brother Marion had been suspended for the year by the Czech Hockey Federation. No explanation was given, none was needed. To add insult to injury, he was disbarred from continuing his legal practice. The Stastny's patriarch, Stanislav, meanwhile, had it just as bad. Overnight, he'd lost his inventory management job with the state-run company he worked at. The remaining family members were subjected to intense surveillance and interrogation. At one point early on, Marion received a phone call from the police asking if he desired to leave the country. He replied that, yes, of course he'd like to join his brothers in Canada, but he maintained that he intended to leave lawfully and with state approval. The voice on the other end told him he would be permitted to leave in a month or two. A month or two passed with no follow-up. Lifelong friends snubbed him. In desperation, Marion reached out to President Gustav Husak himself, but received no reply. That was the final straw. He decided to make contact with the Nordiques. The club got the message and sent him cash via back channels. He started formulating a plan of his own. He would travel to Yugoslavia through Hungary, then break away via Austria and wing it from there. Knowing he was being tailed by Czech police, he decided to try a few dry runs to see how far he could get. He requested a day pass to Hungary for a picnic and a swim by the lake, and to his shock, he was granted it. Then he tried it again and again. No problem. Meanwhile, he was forced to publicly denounce his brothers. News filtered in that Peter had won the Calder Trophy as the NHL's top rookie. The promise of real success awaited him overseas. The next day trip would be the real deal. After obtaining another legal day pass, Marion loaded up his wife and 3 children into the family car and headed for Hungary. But this time, they would not be stopping by the lake. Marion drove straight through Hungary to the border of Yugoslavia. There, they were sure to face an intense interrogation. Much of the money the Nordiques had sent was used to obtain illegal papers. The children hadn't been informed of the plan. At the border, the customs agent eyed the papers with seemingly intense scrutiny. The children started asking naive questions from the back seat. Where are we going? Why are we going to Yugoslavia? Marion's wife Eva did what she could to cover. Marion tightened his grip on the steering wheel. When the agent stamped his approval across the papers, it must have been a tremendous relief. But the Stasnys weren't in the clear just yet. After spending the night in Zagreb, Marion went to the Austrian consulate and applied for a 14-day visa to Vienna. He was refused. They were allowed a 3-day visa instead. That meant the clock was ticking. An overstay would alert authorities and the plan would be nixed. Marion and his family would be watched all the closer, and an opportunity this good would probably never present itself again. Obu and Leger had been monitoring the situation. They sensed a real danger that the Austrian authorities would turn in the Stasnys to the Czechoslovak government. They sent an urgent appeal to Canadian immigration officials to allow the Stasnys to enter Canada. When they were approved, Obu and Leger boarded a plane to Vienna immediately and escorted the family to their new adopted homeland. On the ice, and safely in the blue sweater with the fleur-de-lis patches, Marian was just as good as his younger brothers. The year off had dulled his instincts slightly, and he, like his brothers before him, had to adjust to the extensive travel and lengthy schedule. But his first year in Quebec City, he scored 35 goals and 89 points. The trio played together as a unit, in lockstep. The Stasnys made the Nordiques into contenders. The club improved in the standings again, this time by only 4 points. However, they came alive during the playoffs, dispatching their rival Habs in the first round and the Bruins in the second to make it all the way to the Wales Conference Finals. They would lose to the Islanders in that matchup. Peter would eventually wind up in hockey's Hall of Fame and famously finished second in scoring throughout the decade of the 80s to Wayne Gretzky. But more important than that, the Stasnys took to Quebec's provincial capital as a European-like city. By December 1981, Marian had opened a discotheque/bar/restaurant in the swanky part of town. The Stasnys risked it all to arrive, and when they did, they proved very quickly that they belonged, proving that talent such as theirs belongs to the world. Before we move on, if you enjoy these quiet late-night hockey stories, consider subscribing to Cold Case Hockey for many more to come. And if you'd like to support the channel further, memberships are now live. Thanks for listening, and now, back to the video. In 1982, the Washington Capitals weren't just losing money, they were about to disappear. The league had already discussed shutting them down. Ownership was ready to walk away. The only thing that kept them alive was a last-minute push from their own fans. And then, a few weeks later, a trade was made. Not for a superstar, not for a goal scorer, but for a stay-at-home defenseman who completely remade the team and showed them how to win. By 1982, the Washington Capitals had lost about $20 million. Things were so bad that the club didn't offer season tickets for the coming 1982-83 season. At the annual NHL Board of Governors meeting in June of 1982, owner Abe Pollin and his legal counsel sought to suspend operations altogether. When reports came out, a grassroots support swelled up. An organized effort called Save Our Caps stepped in. The organization's efforts managed to pledge Pollin's minimum requirements for season ticket numbers and helped guarantee that the first 8 home games of the season would be sellouts. Pollin relented. Save Our Caps increased the Capitals' visibility in the community and renewed interest in the on-ice product. When interim GM Roger Crozier was let go by the club in favor of 33-year-old David Poile, Crozier claimed it was because he wasn't a yes man to ownership. The pressure was on Poile to please ownership and reward the fans who rescued the team from extinction, and to get the Caps into the playoffs. After 8 years of existence, they'd never qualified. They were woeful defensively and didn't play as a unit. Top-line center Dennis Marouk set franchise records with 60 goals and 136 points, but was considered a floater, a guy who would circle around the blue line and wait for the breakout pass. At best, it was empty-calorie offense. Ryan Walter was the club's best all-around player, their captain and hardest worker. But one player doesn't reset the culture, at least not usually. The Caps had lost $3 million the previous season alone. Poile did what he could to stop the bleeding. He trimmed veterans off the payroll. Acrobatic but injury-prone goalie Mike Palmateer was traded away. And underperforming forwards Jean Pronovo, Bob Kelly, and Oris Kindrachuk were all released. Montreal Canadiens GM Irving Grundman called Poile on his second day on the job to congratulate him. The two of them got around to talking shop. Poile explained that Ryan Walter was a contract holdout. Habs defenseman Rod Langway was too. Langway and Brian Engblom formed what was widely considered the best defensive tandem in the league, The pair had each finished in the top 5 in plus-minus each of the past 2 seasons. Langway had a great attitude, but a tax situation put his career at an impasse in Montreal. Changing laws made it so that Americans working in Quebec had to pay considerably higher taxes. Because of the new law, Langway was taking home only $40,000 of a $150,000 deal. He requested a new contract or a trade out of town. Players in the U.S. with contracts half Langway's size were taking home more than him after taxes. Langway decided to stay with the Habs through training camp, but would walk out on the team before the regular season started. The next time Poile and Grunman spoke, at a league meeting in Toronto, a deal was made to swap dissatisfied players. For years, the Habs lacked grit. Grunman wanted Walter. Poile wanted a top defenseman in return. The deal ended up being lopsided. On September 9, 1982, Grunman agreed to send both Langway and Engblom to Washington along with forwards Doug Jarvis and Craig Laughlin for Walter and defenseman Rick Green. The Montreal media immediately hated the trade. They despised Grunman. To them, this trade was further validation of an already curdled opinion. They were still bitter that he had selected Doug Wickenheiser with the first overall pick over Denis Savard, an opinion the numbers quickly validated. They lambasted him for giving aging veterans Larry Robinson and Guy Lafleur $100,000 raises while trading away Langway and Engblom. Rick Green was considered to be just an average defender, and a significant downgrade from both Langway or Engblom. Jarvis and Laughlin were seen as underrated players who improved team defense. In an appearance on a Montreal radio station, Langway said he was ecstatic to join Washington, and that Grunman had made the worst trade in the history of the NHL. Then he set out to prove it. In Washington, Langway was named team captain. By early November, the Capitals were showing typical signs, sporting a 3-7-2 record, tied with Hartford for dead last in the NHL. The club still hadn't won a home game despite the string of sellouts. A game against the Blues on November 5th set something off. In the words of Blues coach Emile Francis, it was a very heavy, very tough game. In the first, a Bernie Fedorko shot rattled along the goal line. The replay showed that it was swept out of harm's way by Engblom, but both the referee and goal judge counted it. In the third, with under 2 minutes to go in the game, a goal-mouth scramble seemed to end in a Mike Gartner goal, but it wasn't counted. The game ended in a heartbreaking 1-goal loss. 2 nights later, the Caps hosted the Whalers. Frustrations boiled over. Gartner scored 12 seconds into the game. A line brawl started with a fracas between Capital Randy Holt and Whaler Archie Henderson just 4 minutes in. Langway was ejected for sucker-punching Ray Neufeld during the melee. But the Caps were fired up and won the game 6-2. It was the first in a 6-game undefeated streak. It was the first of 3 such streaks the club would enjoy, including one that lasted 14 games without a loss. Langway stabilized the defense, allowing the offensive weapons to operate. Coach Brian Murray played him 32 minutes a night until he took him off the power play unit. Langway would never miss an optional skate, despite the heavy workload. I suggested he take it easy in practice, but he told me that wasn't a good thing to do, Murray said. Then I told him to take a day off. He was the first one out there. His work habits and character on the ice set a tremendous example. Off the ice, he's a very, very good captain. Under Langway's watch, the team culture shifted. Everybody thought about defense first. Offense became a byproduct of good defending. Even Marouk bought in, accepting an assignment at left wing and seeing his numbers dip. It didn't matter, because for once in his career, his team was winning. Langway introduced accountability. He wasn't afraid to take a teammate aside and tell him what he did wrong. When coaches wanted to work on something with a player, they found that usually Langway had gotten to him first. This might not sound right, Poile said, but I think if there ever was any trouble in the locker room, Rod would throttle the guy causing it. Murray said, "Last year it seemed everybody waited for me to do the yelling and screaming in the room. Rod's taking charge in there, and it's gotten contagious. He even has Mike Gartner and Dennis Maruk going, and they always just sat there quiet." The result was the Capitals' first winning season, shattering many club records along the way. For the first time in 9 years of existence, they had made the playoffs. The Caps lost to the champs, the New York Islanders, 3-1, winning Game 2 on Long Island. Workaholic Langway helped create a tradition from scratch. Regardless of the playoff result, they knew they could play. The team never looked back. They would return to the playoffs each of the next 13 seasons, including every year Langway was a member of the team. He retired after the 1993 season and was selected for the Hockey Hall of Fame in 2002. Home game attendance remained high, and the Capitals never again faced a credible threat of relocation. Abe Poland sold the team to Ted Leonsis in 1999 for $85 million. In some markets, the difference between a team being in the red and the black comes down to personnel, both on the ice and the front office. Sometimes personnel decisions create a domino effect that makes or breaks a franchise. Timing and talent assessment came together to rescue the Capitals from oblivion. On a final note, and to do a sliver of justice to Grunman, both Walter and Green helped Montreal win the Stanley Cup in 1986. In 1985, the Detroit Red Wings signed an undrafted college player to the richest contract a rookie had ever received. More than most of his veteran teammates, including captain Danny Gare. His NHL career lasted 4 games. Less than 2 years later, his contract was bought out. His name was Ray Staszak. For one golden summer, he was the most sought-after prospect in hockey. By the end of the decade, no one would even remember his name. Mike Ilitch bought the Detroit Red Wings in 1982. They'd made the playoffs just twice since 1985. Fans and media called them the Dead Things. Ilitch hired Islanders director of scouting, Jimmy DeVellino, to take over as GM. One of DeVellino's first moves was drafting Steve Yzerman. After Yzerman's arrival in 1983, the Dead Things started to show signs of life. With a smart GM and an owner with deep pockets, an aggressive push began to improve the club by all means necessary. One of those means was scouting the underutilized American college circuit for prospects. In the summer of 1985, the Wings found as many as 5 college players that they liked, and signed all of them. During this spree, they made undrafted Adam Oates the first $1 million rookie. Staszak's contract would top even this. It created a situation that no rookie could possibly live up to. He'd been labeled the Man of Steel for his style of play and for the fact that he worked as a threader operator at a steel mill. Some compared him to Rocky Balboa. He didn't start skating until age 13. Like many boys in the neighborhood, he'd been caught up in Flyers fever after watching the team win back-to-back Stanley Cups. After graduating high school, his job at the steel mill paid for a trip to Minnesota and a tryout with a junior A team. He parlayed that into a scholarship at the University of Illinois, Chicago. Before his freshman year, Staszak's father, Ray Sr., died suddenly at age 45. He suffered a heart attack before work while walking to his vehicle in the driveway. Ray Sr. had been a best friend to Ray, always putting himself second. Ray, the oldest son in the family, considered giving up hockey to help look after his mom and 3 siblings. But Ray Sr. wanted to see how far his son could take hockey, and was proud he was getting a college education out of it, so he stayed on at UIC. That first year, the team won 5 of 35 games. But Staszak found a rhythm on the top line with Colin Chin and Mike Ruchinski. He was a point-a-game player with 32. After the season ended, Staszak was named team MVP. Dennis Hull presented the award to him, along with a pair of cufflinks that Dennis's brother Bobby wore during his Hall of Fame induction. Staszak was speechless. His sophomore year, something clicked. In 38 games, he notched 37 goals and 72 points, leading the conference in scoring. By the time the season was over, he was too old for the draft, but 18 of the 21 NHL teams entered a bidding war for his services. Scouts noted that his skating needed work, but he was a dynamo in the corners. He was almost impossible to dislodge from in front of the net, and banged in most of his goals from the doorstep like Tim Kerr. During his time at UIC, he'd proven his toughness both on and off the ice. One night he'd caught and single-handedly beaten up a trio of car thieves who'd targeted his vehicle. He'd patterned his game on Flyers tough guy Paul Holmgren. DeVelano saw Staszak as a new Bob Nystrom, right down to the mustache. The bidding war had been stoked by Brian Burke, who, due to NCAA rules, was not officially listed as Staszak's player agent, but as family counsel. Burke organized a whistle-stop tour of NHL cities for Staszak, meeting with team officials and exploring facilities. Everywhere he went, he was given the VIP treatment. When the Red Wings sent a personalized jersey with the number 8 on it, along with a massive contract offer, they won the Staszak sweepstakes. Neither Staszak nor Burke realized it at the time, but this kind of special attention became the subject of scorn and resentment in some NHL corners. Aside from those two, the Wings had also signed college free agents Tim Friday, Dale Krantz, and Chris Chahaki, Czech defector Peter Klima, as well as pros Warren Young, Harold Snepps, and Mike McEwen. They'd also signed junior-aged ace Steve Yzerman to a new 7-year, $3 million deal that made him the highest-paid player on the team. In all, Ilitch spent $6.5 million in salary that summer trying to improve the team. Sports Illustrated called the new signees the Doughboys. Oates and Staszak were saddled with the nickname the $1 Million Babies. Staszak finished the preseason with 2 assists in 7 games. Harry Neal, the Wings' new head coach, penciled both Staszak and Oates into the opening night lineup anyway. By Game 5 of the season, he'd shown what he could do. He displayed his trademark hustle and provided a hulking presence in front of the opposing net. He wasn't awful, but early reviews were negative. He didn't look like a $1 million player at all. Neal said, "We have to face the fact that Ray Staszak is going to be a grinding, checking hockey player. He's not a flashy guy who's going to score a lot of goals. If he'd signed a less conspicuous contract, no one would have noticed." In 4 games with the Wings, he had 1 assist. The Wings had been outscored 33-7 since his assist in Game 1. With each passing game, he looked more and more lost out there, culminating in a -4 performance and a 10-1 drubbing at the hands of the North Stars. He had lost his confidence, playing too cautiously. Though Staszak didn't say it outright, it was believed in the organization that the contract was the issue. The Wings sent him down to Adirondack in the hope that he would regain his confidence. Some observers thought they'd noticed Staszak getting open in front of the net, but that his teammates refused to pass to him. In his first 6 games with Adirondack, he had 2 assists. One minor league source in Nova Scotia could only praise Burke for the sell job he did on Staszak. After 11 games, he had a goal and 3 assists, but suffered a broken nose and concussion, which kept him out of the lineup for 6 games. When he returned, he scored 9 goals in 7 games, and most importantly, he started to look comfortable out there. In mid-December, the Wings tried to recall him, but he'd suffered a groin muscle tear in practice just days earlier. It didn't look like much at the time. It sidelined him for 47 games. Some questioned his toughness and resolve. Others thought he might have been faking or avoiding. It was the same kind of injury that had sidelined Al Secord for most of a season. When Staszak finally attended the same clinic in Chicago that Secord had, medical staff were able to properly identify which specific muscle had been torn and rehab it properly. After 10 days of rigorous training, he was finally able to return to the lineup in Glen Falls in late March. Oates and Staszak both helped the Adirondack Wings to a Calder Cup title that year, but Staszak's production was limited to 2 goals and 5 points in 16 playoff games. He was scratched for the deciding game. He wore civilian clothes during the Wings' on-ice celebration. He couldn't have known at the time that he'd never play a meaningful game again. Over in Detroit, the big team had finished up its 1986 season with 17 wins and first overall draft pick. At Training Camp 86, new coach Jacques Demers wasn't willing to hand Staszak a job on a silver platter, but saw him as a good, solid checker. Days before the regular season was set to open, Staszak suffered 2 rotator cuff tears during practice. The Wings planned on sending him back to Adirondack, but the injury complicated matters. He was the last roster cut, and would presumably be one of the first forwards to be recalled had he stayed healthy. He was expected to miss a couple weeks, but instead, the injury required surgery. The surgery required 6 weeks of immobilization of the shoulder, followed by 4 months of therapy before he could resume playing. His season was effectively over before it had even begun. By June of 1987, Staszak had played 30 professional games, 4 in Detroit, and had been paid over $500,000 to do it. The Red Wings placed him on waivers. When he cleared, they bought out the remaining 3 years of his contract, saving over $500,000 in the process. Burke was no longer his agent, or, that is, family counsel, but he expected another bidding war to erupt. Burke calculated at least a half-dozen teams would offer him a new contract, but the market was dry. By that time, Burke was an executive with the Canucks. He arranged a tryout for Staszak at Canucks training camp in 1988. It was a good fit. The Canucks were a rebuilding team looking for hard-working, character players to change the losing culture of the team. He wouldn't have looked out of place in a bottom-6 role there. Day 1 of camp would be his first serious skate since shoulder reconstruction surgery. He didn't make it to the end of the day. He blew out his shoulder on a non-contact drill. After missing the entire previous 2 seasons with injuries, this was the end of the line. He became a cautionary tale. He might have had a solid bottom-6 career had his confidence not been undermined by the expectations of a massive contract. Injuries did the rest. Observers were quick to point out one thing. At least he retired a rich man. It was a routine play. Blues forward Steve Tuttle charged the net looking for a pass. Sabres defender Uwe Krupp hauled him down from behind. Tuttle slid feet first into Sabres goalie Clint Malarchuk. At first, Malarchuk thought he'd been kicked in the face. He didn't feel pain. He brought his hand to his neck. When he pulled it away, it was covered in blood. He tore off his mask. Every heartbeat sent a spray onto the ice. He pressed his hand to the wound, trying to keep the blood in, but it rushed through his fingers. He slumped forward. The skate blade had severed his jugular vein. He had minutes to live. Attention turned to the scrum that was forming behind the net. Sabres defenseman Grant Ledyard was the first to notice the blood. He started banging on the glass trying to get the attention of the team doctor. He was hysterical. Everyone in the building was shocked. The crease was covered in blood. Some fainted. Others vomited. 2 people in the stands had heart attacks. Rick Mahar of the Blues hollered for help. The TV broadcast cut to a commercial immediately. Color commentator Mike Robitaille was crying. Malarchuk knew he didn't have much time. He'd seen a TV show that said a severed jugular would turn fatal in minutes. He was sure he was going to die. Jim Pizzatelli, the Sabres trainer, got there first. "Jim, it's my jugular," Malarchuk said. Pizzatelli said, "Just do what I say. We're going to save you." He took gauze that he kept in his right pocket and jammed it into the 6-inch gash on Malarchuk's neck. Pizzatelli pinched Malarchuk's jugular with his fingers, Malarchuk said, "Jim, I can't breathe." Pizzatelli calmly told him that they had to stop the blood flow first. Then he could worry about breathing. "You're not going to breathe until we get you to a doctor," he said. Pizzatelli helped Malarchuk to his skates and walked him through the tunnel behind his net. A slip and fall would most likely have proven fatal at that point. If it had happened at the other end of the ice, they might not have gotten there in time. Pizzatelli had been a combat engineer and part-time medic in Vietnam. After he was drafted, he was deployed to South Vietnam in 1970 to conduct patrols and destroy bridges used by the Viet Cong. During the second week of his 13-month tour, he and 3 other soldiers were hit by a truck while patrolling a village. Pizzatelli suffered 4 broken ribs. Another American was tossed into a gully where a sheet metal hut decapitated him. They were medevaced out. The young man's headless body lay beside him. The situation gave him a new appreciation for the importance of medical staff. He was part of a unit of 20, not entirely unlike a hockey team. The guys would spend a year together minimum, like a hockey season. What prepared Pizzatelli the most was being ready for the unexpected. Suddenly he'd hear a thud, and the guy next to him would be shot in the shoulder. He'd always dive in with no hesitation. Pizzatelli got Malarchuk to a table in the trainer's room. At this point, Malarchuk was asking for the resident chaplain of the odd. He wasn't in that night. He asked to call his mother, who was watching via satellite feed. Someone had got a hold of her. She sent the message that she loved him. One of the team doctors pressed a towel to Malarchuk's neck with all his weight. He would let up for Malarchuk to breathe, and the blood would spurt out again. He knew that if he closed his eyes, he would never wake up. The ambulance arrived after 10 minutes. They got him on a stretcher and put an IV in his arm. "Put in a couple stitches and get me back out there," Malarchuk said, blood gurgling. No one laughed. A team doctor got into the ambulance and pushed down on his neck with the towel all the way to Buffalo General. There it took 300 stitches to patch him up. There was still 45 minutes left to play in the game. Jacques Cloutier was brought in and the Blues won it 2-1. Malarchuk lost nearly a gallon of blood on the ice, but only spent 1 night in the hospital. He returned to the lineup in time to start the second game of the playoffs just 2 weeks later. If Jim Pizzatelli hesitated for even a few seconds, hockey loses a player in front of 14,000 people. Instead, the game resumed. In the span of 10 minutes, a routine play became a battlefield, and a former combat engineer became the calmest man in the building. Hockey almost lost Malarchuk that night, but it didn't, because someone who had already seen worse refused to panic. At the 1987 World Juniors Tournament, Canadian forward Everett Sanapas cross-checked Soviet forward Pavel Kostychkin down to the ice. When Kostychkin got up, all he saw was red. Theron Fleury happened to be nearby. Kostychkin two-handed Fleury in the leg. Fleury swung back twice as hard. Evgeny Davidov of the Soviet Union left the bench to enter the fray, and a brawl cleared both benches. After a 20-minute stoppage of pure chaos, play was suspended, and both teams were disqualified from finishing the tournament. Just a few days earlier, Mike Hartman of Team USA two-handed Fleury across the leg. Fleury had that effect on people, and not always just the opposition. Was he targeted for his size or for the way he played? Over the summer, he was drafted by the Calgary Flames in the 8th round. He'd been eligible the previous year and was passed over 252 times. By Fleury's count, that made him a 20th round pick, 418th overall. 417 players were chosen ahead of him because he was listed at 5'5", 150 pounds. In his draft year and over-age year with the Moose Jaw Warriors, he scored 104 goals and 237 points in 138 games. Fleury was excited for his first NHL training camp. Probably, he was a little too excited. He hit everything that moved, including veterans. Nothing and nobody was sacred. Everyone got a sample. That was one thing. The other was his cockiness. He was a pest in the Ken Linseman mode, but more skilled, and somehow even more agitating. The veterans called him cocky, then huddled together and conspired against him. They wanted to teach him a lesson. They stapled him to the boards. They finished every check against him. They punished him 10 times plus a scrimmage, no holding back. They taught Fleury a lesson, all right. They taught him that he could absorb their best and keep fighting. By December, Fleury was back with Team Canada. This time, he was their captain. In the tournament, Fleury scored 6 goals and led Canada to gold. He scored 160 points in 65 games with the Warriors that year. He also picked up 235 penalty minutes. Nobody knew why at the time, but Fleury was playing angry. And the angrier he got, the better he was. His 160 points tied him with Joe Sakic for the WHL lead. The difference between Fleury and Sakic was that everybody considered Sakic a shoo-in for an NHL job, and those same people considered Fleury a 100-to-1 long shot. When the Warriors' season was finished, he got his first taste of professional hockey. Fleury was recalled to the Flames' IHL affiliate, the Salt Lake Golden Eagles. Birds' rookie head coach Paul Baxter had been watching Fleury from afar all season. Baxter had been something of a hellraiser himself during his career, and saw something in Fleury that he understood. Baxter got Fleury onto the ice and involved early. He notched his first assist 41 seconds into the game. It ended up being an intense, emotional contest, but it was always going to be. The Eagles and the Fort Wayne Comets were familiar with each other. Their record-setting 340 penalty-minute match had only taken place a year earlier, and with Fleury flying around, hitting everything in sight, the Eagles were electrified. According to Golden Eagles defender Kevin Guy, Fleury got everyone fired up. There were line brawls, one-on-one fights, and at least one ugly stick-swinging incident that got Comet Mike LeCun tossed. Fleury banged in a rebound for the go-ahead goal midway through the third, then assisted on the insurance marker. He finished the game with 2 goals and 3 assists and a 6-4 victory. Due to baroque, esoteric rules about junior-eligible players, Baxter sat Fleury out for the next week. The junior scoring sensation was only eligible to play 10 total games, including playoffs. That week, Fleury practiced intensely, learning the Salt Lake system, skating hard, and keeping his legs sharp. In his next game, against goalie Mike Richter and the Colorado Rangers, Fleury grabbed another goal and assist. He finished the regular season with 3 goals and 7 points in 2 games. Their first-round playoff matchup would be against the Peoria Rivermen. Fleury scored 8 seconds into the first game of the series, a blast off the rush from the face-off circle. Fleury then broke a 2-2 tie when he deflected a Crispiotti shot during a screen. In the third period, Fleury got cross-checked into Rivermen goalie Rick Knickel while camped out front. Knickel swore Fleury cross-checked him in the head. Maybe he was just weary of Fleury's presence. Either way, Knickel cut him down with a vicious slash, but the Eagles won 4-3. Fleury scored the opening goal again in Game 2 as well. As the second period was drawing to a close, Fleury gave Rivermen veteran Ron Handy a good hard check, then another. Then the two got into a shoving match. Rivermen Michael Dark and Rob Dahlman got involved. Then Salt Lake's Bob Bodak. The 3 Rivermen got roughing calls. The Golden Eagles took advantage at the beginning of the third with a goal by Randy Busick, then coasted the rest of the game to a 5-1 victory. Baxter took Fleury out of the lineup for Game 3, and the Golden Eagles lost. Fleury was back in for Game 4 and made a costly mistake with a weak backcheck on a power play, which resulted in a shorthanded goal against. Peoria took that game too. The Eagles got beer dumped on them with half a minute to go in the game and nearly climbed the glass. They took out their frustrations on the ice, with 2 fights in the final minute. It was Fleury's first loss as a professional. He finished the night with 1 assist. Fleury scored 3 more goals in the final 2 games of the series, helping the Eagles get to their second round. Their next opponent would be the Rangers. Because Fleury only had 2 games remaining, there was debate about his usage. Some thought it might be worth it to break the rules and just play him every game. The Flames GM Cliff Fletcher wouldn't have it. With the Flames swept out of the playoffs by the Oilers, he'd be watching Fleury closely. Surprisingly, Baxter dressed Fleury for Game 1. Fleury responded by scoring the opening goal yet again. He also scored an empty netter to salt away a 6-4 win. Fleury watched the Eagles lose Game 2 from the press box. Game 3 would be his finale. Fleury scored his 10th of the playoffs and added an assist before regulation time ended in a 4-4 draw. The Eagles outshot the Rangers on a 3-1 ratio, but Richter played bravely. The final play of the game was an awkward one. Eagles regular season scoring champion Rich Chernomaz shot a puck off the end boards which careened out and hit the referee in the skate. If it hadn't hit the ref's skate, the puck likely would have drifted harmlessly into the corner. But as it was, Fleury picked up the loose biscuit, faked a pass, and crashed into Richter. Fleury's momentum knocked the Rangers goalie backwards and knocked the net off its mooring, but not before the puck had crossed the goal line. The play counted. Good goal. Fleury had scored on both his first and last shifts of the season with the Eagles and finished with 11 goals and 16 points in 8 games. Salt Lake would go on to complete their Turner Cup championship bid without Fleury. To make everybody happy, Fleury put on 10 pounds of muscle before Flames training camp. It slowed his foot speed a touch, but affected little else. Once again, Fleury came in with what the veterans considered a cocky attitude. He already understood that as long as he wore a hockey jersey, he would have to prove himself every single night, without exception. His compete level was off the charts. His determination was second to none. Still, there was that one issue no one could see past. His relentless motor was more than work ethic. It was survival. If he showed even a crumb of intimidation, the opponents would never stop coming after him. In team scrimmages, 6'4" centerman Joel Otto hounded him all around the ice. Fleury never backed down. His line, with diminutive sniper Hakan Loob and tough guy Stu Grimson, was the hottest at camp. The one popular with veterans, Fleury began appearing on fan radar. His style had the wags reaching for the superlatives. The terms buzzsaw, dynamo, and mini juggernaut were bandied about. Fleury scored 2 goals and an assist in a game he thought he'd be watching from the press box. He took abuse in front of the net and dished it out in the open areas of the ice. Still, the question circulated. Could he take the pounding dished out by NHL defenders? Flames coach Terry Crisp was almost dismissive of the idea. If anything, his presence and undeniable play created something of a dilemma for him. Crisp had Fleury on an NHL-AHL bubble. Despite the buzz he generated, skepticism abounded. Local scribe Eric Duhatschek had him pegged as a career minor leaguer, one who would score 150 points every year. The Golden Eagles were happy with that. They saw him as a draw, something incredibly rare in the minor ranks. After 3 preseason games, Fleury led the Flames with 4 points, playing like a big man. To Fleury, size was just a number on the stat sheet. For everybody else, that's all they saw. When Crisp assigned him to Salt Lake, he said it never hurts a young player to spend time in the minors. After spending half the season with the Golden Eagles, Fleury was recalled by the Flames. He'd scored 37 goals and 74 points in 40 games. He could no longer be denied. Fleury suited up for his first NHL game on January 3, 1989 against the Quebec Nordiques. Yuri Hrdina was taken out of the lineup to accommodate him. Coming into the game, the Flames needed a spark. At the end of December, they'd slumped to a 3-4-2 mark and had gone 5 games without a win in regulation. Fleury overcame some early jitters and settled in, doing anything and everything he could to help the team win. He laid out defenseman Curtis Lecision with a big hit which sent him sprawling on the ice. He played with speed and drove to the net. He took a regular shift on the power play and registered 3 shots. Though he didn't score, he did something even more remarkable. He'd made it. In the next game against LA, Chris put Terry on the line with Joey Mullen and Doug Gilmour. He fit right in, notching 3 assists. After the game, Chris reckoned that Fleury had made more happen than Gretzky or anyone else out there. The trio produced either a goal or a dangerous chance on every one of their shifts. Fleury had already won over Flames fans. After 2 games, he was already a fan favorite. The next game was against the hated Oilers. Grant Fuhr started in goal. Fleury beat him twice. On the second one, he danced around Kevin Lowe and snapped it home. His first goal, shot from the top of the face-off circle, beat Fuhr's short side, held up as the winner. In the second period, with the game already 4-0 Flames, Fleury got tangled up with Jari Kurri and his stick ended up striking Kurri's neck. That got the entire Oilers team riled up. Kurri even followed him to the bench with some choice words. Fleury just sat down calmly. In 3 games with Fleury in the lineup, the Flames scored 20 and surrendered 9. Fleury had factored into 5 of those 20 goals and was a +4. After the game, Flames executive Al McNeil said, "Sure, nobody his size has ever stuck in the NHL, but then, nobody his size has played with his attitude. If he'd stepped into the lineup and played a handful of games, not scored any points, and been sent down again to stay, we'd still be talking about him. But that's not what happened. After 3 games, 2 goals and 3 assists, he'd proven he belonged." On February 21, 1985, St. Louis Blues general manager Ron Caron shipped starting goaltender Mike Liut and a player to be named later to the Hartford Whalers for goaltender Greg Millen and Whalers captain Mark Johnson. At the time, the Blues were in first place in the Norris Division and had recently enjoyed a 12-3-4 run. As a hockey trade, the timing didn't make a lot of sense. Liut had been a heart and soul guy in St. Louis, part of a strong core which included Bernie Federko, Joey Mullen, Rob Ramage, and Captain Brian Sutter. Liut had been an award-winning goaltender with the Blues and was considered elite at his position. So why did the Blues trade away their franchise goaltender? The 1970s were unkind to the Blues. Since Glenn Hall's retirement in 1971, stability in net had been elusive, and as the decade wore on, fan enthusiasm followed suit. Consequently, attendance fell from league best in the early 70s to near the bottom by the end of the decade. Mike Liut had been drafted by the Blues in 1976 but didn't sign with them. After finishing his amateur career at Bowling Green University, Liut signed with the New England Whalers of the WHA and was then traded to the Cincinnati Stingers. There, he was able to quietly work his way up the ranks of the Stingers from a backup with a post-4 goals against average to a chain-starting, sub-350 stabilizer. When the WHA merged into the NHL, it did not take the Stingers with it. The club folded, and Liut's NHL rights reverted to the team that had originally drafted him. The Blues brought him in to be the backup to long-suffering incumbent Ed Staniowski. Before the halfway mark of the 1979-80 season, Liut had established himself as the better goalie and once again took the bulk of the starts to finish the year. His play was crucial to the Blues' 32-point improvement in the standings. Before long, his large frame, thoughtful nature, and college pedigree had hockey people comparing him to Ken Dryden. In 1980-81, he won the Lester B. Pearson Award for Best Player in the League as voted by the players. This time, the Blues improved by 27 points and finished as the second-best team in the league. The Blues' defense was weak. The best defenseman was Jack Braunscheidel, who probably would have been the 3rd or 4th best on most teams. He was also voted first-team All-Star and pitched a 25-shot shutout in the mid-season All-Star game. Liut even came second to Gretzky in the closest Hart Trophy race to date. It also just so happened to be a contract year. Blues GM Emile Francis rewarded Liut's breakout with a 5-year contract worth $900,000 annually. While the Blues wildly ascended the standings, attendance saw only a modest uptick. The club had been purchased by R. Hal Dean on behalf of Ralston Purina in July 1977. When Dean retired in 1979, the Blues lost its strongest internal advocate. By the time Liut won his Pearson, Ralston Purina saw the franchise as an albatross. The company was actively seeking an exit to focus on their primary business interests. The suitors were few and far between. By 1982, after taking on an estimated $8 million in losses since acquiring the team, the company was desperate to sell. They tried to sell the Blues to Bill Hunter, who had helped found the WHA. Hunter intended to move the team to Saskatoon. For a time, a deal in principle was reached, with most financing in place, but the league intervened. With the league blocking the sale, Ralston Purina sued the league. The league countersued, and the company took steps to fold the team and sell off the players' contracts. Staff was laid off en masse. Emile Francis resigned and moved to Hartford. The team didn't even participate in the 1983 entry draft. But the league stepped in, assumed control of player contracts, and prevented the franchise from being dissolved. They even found a buyer who was willing to keep the team in St. Louis. Harry Ornest bought the team at pennies on the dollar and immediately started watching the budget. The biggest ticket item in his sights was Mike Liut's contract. Liut saw the writing on the wall. He played the entire 1983-84 season knowing that each game could be his last as a Blue. By season's end, he still wore the Blue note. The off-season passed without incident. Then, the new season began. When Caron acquired goalie Rick Walmsley from the Montreal Canadiens, Liut perceived a deal was imminent. Liut understood that as soon as Caron's asking price was met, he was gone. In an odd turn, the better Liut played, the higher the chances that he would be moved. He likely assumed it would be to a contender, Boston perhaps. Then an old friend called from New England. Emile Francis was the man who had signed Liut to his big contract, and had no problem paying the rest of it out in Hartford. Liut was the exact, veteran, stabilizing force the Whalers needed to take themselves seriously. The Blues were happy. They were still in first place and now had two number-one goalies to work with in Walmsley and Millen. More importantly, they saved money on the deal. Millen's contract was worth a reported $400,000 a year, while Mark Johnson's was worth an estimated $250,000, allowing the team to save $250,000 from Liut's $900,000. Johnson was flipped in the offseason in yet another cost-saving move. With Fedorko, Doug Gilmour, and Rick Mahar on the team, it didn't really make sense to keep him at that price point. Fedorko and Gilmour wound up in the Hall of Fame. Mahar would later win a Selke Trophy with the Blues. Millen and Walmsley developed into a dynamic duo for several seasons. In 1986, the duo helped the team to the conference final on a rotation. Liut led the Whalers to their best seasons, taking the eventual Cup champs, the Montreal Canadiens, to overtime with Game 7 of the division final. It was as far as the Whalers would ever go in the postseason. They even threw a parade for the team. Programmer's note: for more on this story, see our previous video on the subject. The following season, the Whalers would win their only division title in club history, and Liut would finish runner-up for the Vezina. With his time split between St. Louis and Hartford, Liut ended up with the most games, wins, saves, and shutouts for any goalie during the decade of the 1980s. After being forced into early retirement due to an eye injury in 1992, Liut would become a player agent. His experiences during this timeline were seemingly formative, giving him a unique perspective on the practicalities of player salaries and a team's fiscal requirements. In December 1986, Harry Ornest sold the Blues to local businessman Mike Shanahan. In the 3.5 years Ornest owned the team, he cut the Blues' $4.5 million payroll by $1 million, raised ticket prices by 10%, bringing down the break-even mark for ticket sales. He also increased the club's TV presence, filled the venue with more events, and built luxury suites. All of these moves increased profitability. It came with a flip side. Ornest developed a reputation as a cheapskate owner, arguably the worst offender in that regard. When the Blues lost Game 7 of the conference final, he canceled the charter flight home. Rumors circulated that the move was punitive, but it was almost certainly an airline error. Such was the state of his penny-pinching reputation. When he sold the team, he made a large profit. This happened not long before the NFL Cardinals left the city for Phoenix. The Shanahan Group stabilized the Blues, and attendance climbed steadily with the emergence of superstar Brett Hull and the opening of the Kiel Center in 1994. Eventually, the club became one of the hottest tickets in the league, and has essentially remained so ever since, with only minor hiccups. Thanks to the 3-goal situation in Montreal, Steve Penney and head coach Jean Perron couldn't even look at each other without fighting. From Penney's perspective, Perron was a hypocrite. He would say one thing and do another. On either side of him were 31-year-old veteran Doug Soetart and 20-year-old rookie Patrick Waugh. At the end of the season, the team would win the Stanley Cup, but one goalie's name was left off the engraving, and he would demand a trade out of town. Penney had established himself as the number one the season before. He had known the rush of home crowds chanting his name, but knee and groin injuries limited his effectiveness during training camp. Waugh and Soetart got a head start. Penney's legs were heavily taped, and he never found a rhythm. Midway through the year, veteran players on the team expressed frustration with the goaltending situation. The Canadiens played a smothering defensive system that Perron had inherited from outgoing coach Jacques Lemaire, under whom Perron had served as an assistant. The system kept Montreal in the conversation among good teams, but it lacked a key ingredient needed to become a true contender: steady goaltending. The trio struggled to deliver consistency, but Penney struggled most of all. He played 18 games that season, winning 6, but allowed 3 or more goals in all but one of his starts. As the year progressed, he slipped further and further from favor. The Canadiens had legitimate Stanley Cup aspirations, and Perron was willing to go with Penney in the postseason because of his experience. But a ligament injury ended that possibility. By the time Penney returned, the team was deep into a run, and his presence would have disrupted the chemistry. He did not dress for any of the Stanley Cup final games that year, and was therefore not eligible to have his name engraved on the cup. The Canadiens did give him a championship ring, though. For a goaltender whose game was powered by confidence, the 3-goalie setup was a nightmare. Trying to win steady crease time while recovering from injury only compounded the problem. After Waugh cemented his position with the Stanley Cup and Conn Smythe Trophy, Penney asked for a trade. On August 19, 1986, Penney was traded with the rights to unsigned European prospect Jan Ingman to the Winnipeg Jets for Brian Hayward. The Jets had suffered from uneven goaltending throughout their brief existence to that point. Hayward had lost the confidence of his teammates, while Penney was struggling to maintain confidence in himself. As a side note, one of Winnipeg's steadiest netminders up to that point had been Doug Soetart. Penney was not brought in as a solution. He was brought in as part of an open competition that included 9 other goaltenders. Winnipeg general manager John Ferguson took a flyer on Penney, hoping he could regain his 1984-85 form. Jets coach Dan Maloney entered the season without a designated starter, but with a philosophy: the hot hand would play. During training camp, Penney became a father. He missed time to be present for the birth of his first child and to help his wife during the immediate postpartum period. The missed time affected his evaluation. It wasn't on Penney, and it wasn't on the Jets coaching staff, but by the time he returned, he was unable to catch up to 2 hot rookies, Pokey Reddick and Daniel Barchome. He appeared in only 1 preseason game and was, once again, a step behind his teammates. By late October, he was shelved with a strained and bruised right knee, the same knee that had previously required surgery. He returned to game action nearly 2 months after coming out of the lineup. His first start was against the top 5 offense, the Philadelphia Flyers. They overwhelmed him. Penney had little chance on 2 of the goals, which resulted from 2-on-1s. But when Tim Kerr scored his second of the night from in tight, Maloney had seen enough. Penney had allowed 3 goals on 4 shots. From that point forward, Penney never regained the confidence of the coaching staff and never regained a foothold in Winnipeg. Penney was given only 2 more NHL starts the rest of the season. Those came against a pair of powerhouses, Edmonton and Washington. As the veteran of the group, it made sense for Maloney to deploy Penney in this way, but it did nothing to help him reclaim a full-time role. Nobody was quite sure what to make of him. The results were poor, and the numbers reflected that. But his play still suggested enough to coaches that he belonged in the league. By the end of the campaign, Penney had appeared in just 7 NHL games and had been given only 5 starts. He also played 4 games on assignment in Sherbrooke. Once again, he played just well enough to warrant another look. By March, he was still on the main roster but was no longer dressing for games. He had reached an uncomfortable middle ground. He wasn't playing bad enough to be released, and he wasn't playing good enough to trust. Most of all, he wasn't being played enough at all to afford a proper evaluation. Penney didn't request a trade this time, but he did inquire with John Ferguson about his trade value. There had to be a team out there with a goaltending need. Winnipeg kept him high on the shelf, very high, in the press box. He remained a positive presence in the room, but he was unhappy with the situation. All he could do was be a supportive teammate, continue training, and wait for an opportunity. A one-game-and-see approach didn't suit him. Penney had always been a confidence and rhythm goaltender. With a clear understanding of where he stood, he could relax and just play. Ferguson sent out feelers, but there were no bites. The trade deadline came and went. By that point, Penney effectively had no trade value. It's said that a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. The same can be true of an organization. The Jets' position was to explore trading Penney, while also being content to keep him. The situation created a negative feedback loop. Maloney preferred to play the hot goalie. Penney was out of rhythm, while the rookies had momentum. With the team winning, there was little reason to disrupt the flow. Without crease time, Penney had no chance to reset. With no chance to reset, market interest stayed low. As long as market interest remained weak, he stayed put, and the loop reinforced itself. Ferguson didn't appear eager to move him. He was willing to bring Penney back for another season because, in Ferguson's assessment, he was still a quality NHL goaltender. Early into the following season, Penney was still awaiting a trade. A couple of teams expressed interest, but nothing materialized. After clearing waivers, he began the year with Winnipeg's AHL affiliate in Moncton. It no longer appeared likely that a trade would happen at all. Penney played well in Moncton, well enough to stir trade rumors once again. By the time he was recalled in January, Penney had formally requested a trade. The Jets hedged. If he carried his AHL momentum to the NHL level and stabilized the net, the organization would look shrewd for having kept him. Internally, the message remained vague. Play well and see what happens. Penney was told that how long he stayed with the club depended on how well he played, but that environment had never been one in which he thrived. To the Jets' credit, they gave Penney a legitimate opportunity this time. He received 4 starts in 5 games. He opened the stretch with 2 wins, but finished it with goals against average north of 4 and a save percentage around .830. He appeared in 3 more losses for Winnipeg and then quietly disappeared from the picture. For Penney, the ending didn't come in a dramatic 10-goal loss or a redemptive final performance. He was given one formal final opportunity, and it didn't hold. Eventually, the league simply stopped calling. Looking back, Steve Penney said his proudest moment wasn't the playoff run in 1984. It was the season that followed, when he proved to himself that he belonged. When we look at the shape of Steve Penney's career, we can see how coaching decisions accumulate. Not one choice, but a series of them. philosophies, preferences, timing, each small on its own, but heavy in total. Coaching is a transient job, and that reality creates urgency. Decisions have to be made quickly. Systems have to be deployed. Once a season is in motion, there is rarely room to wait, or to ease a goaltender back slowly from injury. The margin between winning and losing could narrow to a single position, and when that happens, patience becomes a luxury. In Penney's case, nothing ended abruptly. There was no single moment where the door slammed shut. Instead, a series of expedient decisions slowed his career to a halt. Hockey is the fastest game there is, but sometimes it's the slow, procedural parts of it that have the greatest impact. He came in off the street. He didn't have an appointment. He didn't have an agent. He didn't have permission. But he had an attitude and a pitch. Sign me to a contract, or Guy Fleury is going to get beat up. It sounded like a threat. It wasn't. The man was offering protection. His name was Norman Barron, and he didn't have a place in hockey. He hadn't been drafted. He wasn't scouted. He hadn't played an organized game in 4 years, and even then only as a junior B player. What he did have on his resume was a Mr. Montreal bodybuilding championship and a Mr. Quebec title as well. He worked as a nightclub bouncer, and he could bench press 600 pounds. Nobody in Montreal was stronger, and he had the titles to prove it. Watching Guy Lafleur and his Canadiens get ragdolled by the Sabres in the 1983 playoffs sparked something in him. Montreal was the better team, but Buffalo beat them up and swept them in 3. Barron decided during the handshake line, never again. Was it strength and confidence, or delusion? So he walked into the Canadiens' offices, built in street clothes. Canadiens' director of scouting, Claude Ruel, dismissed the brash young man with a promise. Lose 25 pounds, come back for training camp, and we'll give you a fair chance. It wasn't a deal, it was a brush-off. But Barron took the challenge seriously. When camp rolled around, he showed up 25 pounds lighter, as promised. He drew stares and dumb looks. Players elbowed each other and nodded in his direction. Who was this guy? Apparently he'd played 7 games with the junior Canadiens way back in 1977. What was he doing there then? He declared to whoever would listen that he was there to take Chris Nyland's job. Nyland was the one Barron blamed for the Habs' playoff loss and for leaving Lafleur unprotected. Against all odds, the club kept him around, signed him to a minor league deal, and sent him to Halifax to play for the Canadiens' affiliate, the Nova Scotia Voyageurs. There, he did his job and did it well. He racked up 275 penalty minutes, enough for third most in the circuit. He even managed 11 goals and 22 points while he was at it. Near the end of the year, he was called up by the big club. Barron played in each of the last 4 games of the season. In the first 2, against the New York teams, Barron was a non-factor. Before the 3rd game, he made some disparaging remarks about Nordiques center Dale Hunter, claiming that he didn't like Hunter's style of play and that he was going to let him know on the ice. Hunter, by then a veteran player with 4 seasons under his belt, goaded Barron into taking an undisciplined cross-checking penalty. He also took an undisciplined spearing major. Nordiques brass used the incident to criticize Montreal's lack of depth and organizational philosophy. He got into his first fight in the last game of the season against Boston's Jim Nill. When the playoffs started, the Habs met Boston again. Barron got into a couple more fights against Brian Curran and Mike Milbury. The Habs won the series, but put Barron on the shelf for the remainder of the playoffs. Barron didn't get a chance to suit up for the Good Friday Massacre game in the next round. One thing was proven in his 7 games with the Habs. While Barron was on the team, Guy Lafleur did not get pushed around. At training camp 1984, Chris Nilan proved himself to be the better player. Nilan had played every playoff game for Montreal the previous spring, whereas Bergen was shelved after the Boston series. Bergen was assigned to Sherbrooke, where the Canadiens had relocated their affiliate from Halifax. There he was used primarily as an enforcer. Bergen balked. After a full year as a pro, Bergen felt he had proven that he could do more on the ice than just fight. He thought he had particularly strong chemistry with Serge Boisvert and Randy Buzik, but it's possible he simply had his signals crossed, and the true chemistry was between Boisvert and Buzik. The situation led to disagreements with Sherbrooke coach Pierre Creamer. It was a confident turn for the man who barged into Montreal offices just a year earlier demanding a job as an enforcer. Creamer inserted Claude LaRose on that line, and the trio notched nearly 100 goals, even with Boisvert being called up during the season. Bergen scored 5 that year. Creamer sat Bergen for about half the season, considering his effort as indifferent. Sherbrooke won the Calder Cup that year, thanks in large part to Patrick Waugh, Stéphane Richer, and Brian Skrudland, who would all go on to help Montreal win the Stanley Cup the following season. Bergen played 2 games during the playoffs run and racked up 25 minutes in penalties. That September, his services were sold to the St. Louis Blues. It wasn't exactly what he had signed up for, but Guy Lafleur had announced his shocking retirement, and St. Louis represented a chance to get out of the box he found himself in with the Habs. He started the season well in Peoria with 8 points and over 60 penalty minutes in just 17 games. He was recalled by the Blues in early December, but something was wrong. He wasn't fighting. He scored his first career goal in his 7th game with the Blues, but had no penalty minutes on the year to that point. When he finally did get into a fight a month later, it was against a prone and defenseless Tiger Williams. With Tiger on one knee and not ready for a fight, Bergen jumped him and pummeled him while he was helpless. In Game 13, it was his first fighting major with the Blues. At times, Blues coach Jacques Demers deployed Bergen as nuclear deterrent against opposing teams, but Bergen seemed unwilling to engage. By late February, after 23 games with the Blues, Bergen had accumulated exactly 2 goals and 2 fights. The Blues had seen enough. According to one source with the team, Bergen was sent down because he didn't do his job. That source also added a bitter eulogy. He'll never play for the Blues again. Bergen never played another NHL game and retired at the end of the year. He opened a gym in Verdun and eventually settled down as a postal worker before retiring. Bergen uniquely demanded a job in the NHL and fought his way into it. But after a while, he discovered he could do more than just fight. He could play. But coaches at the time didn't need another guy who could play. They needed a fighter. But he wasn't going to be told what to do or when and how to do it. He was going to play the game on his terms and show the world what he could do. Today, coaches demand that a fighter can play. The days of the one-job specialist are over. Maybe Bergen was ahead of his time. Then again, today, he would never have been allowed in the building to begin with. If Hollywood ever went looking for hockey stories, and it probably should, it wouldn't have to look far. Charlie Simmer's career has everything. The dizzying heights, the terrifying lows, the creamy middles, and it all happened in Hollywood's backyard. But the real story isn't the drama. It's how on earth the Kings plucked an unknown player, a farmhand, from the minors and turned him into a reliable, high-level goal scorer. Was it the system? Could just about anybody have played with Marcel Dion and scored 50 goals? Or had there been more to Charlie Simmer than meets the eye all along? They say you can't teach size, but some coaches can't see past it.
Charlie Simmer was drafted by the California Seals 39th overall in the 1974 draft. At 6'3", 210 pounds, he had size, and his junior numbers proved he had skill. What he didn't have was breakout speed, but that was okay. It was his size that was coveted. The Seals never really knew what they had in Charlie Simmer. This was a pattern within the organization. The Seals would yo-yo Simmer up and down from the Salt Lake Golden Eagles to the big club, teasing him with phantom opportunities. He would dress for a game with the Seals, but only get 1 or 2 shifts all night. They wanted him to be a checking forward. Then, they'd send him back down for not scoring. The situation proved discouraging. Simmer wanted to prove he wasn't just a fringe player. All he needed was a real chance. This went on for 3 years, even after the organization had left the Bay Area for Cleveland. It's not a value judgment to say that if the Seals had managed their talent better, they probably would have won more games and drawn more fans. But I digress. By the end of the 1977 season, the financial picture had gotten so bad for the Cleveland Barons that they released all their minor league players from their contracts. This left Simmer a free agent. The Los Angeles Kings took a flyer on Charlie Simmer, signing him to a 1-year deal with an option year. They were getting a big center who had increased his scoring totals in each of his pro seasons, and they got him for nothing. Simmer immediately jumped into a first-line role with the Kings' farm club, the Springfield Indians, and led the team with 42 goals. There, he played alongside Bob Berry, the most productive left-winger in Kings history at that point. Berry had been dispatched to the minors, ostensibly to learn the coaching ropes. The following season, Berry was named head coach of the LA Kings. For the 5th straight year, Simmer started in the minors. Outwardly, he expressed quiet patience, but inwardly, he battled discouragement and depression, not allowing himself to dwell on his situation. By January of 1979, Simmer was having a decent season in Springfield. But when Berry needed a guy who could slot into the Kings' top line, he recalled Simmer. Having played alongside Simmer all the previous season, Berry was uniquely suited to identify what Simmer could bring to the team. Simmer knew how to use his size for offensive advantage, throwing his weight around to scoop up loose pucks and then make a give-and-go play and crash the net. Simmer's first game back up with the Kings on January 13th is the stuff of legends. Berry put him on the top line with Marcel Dion and Dave Taylor. Taylor dug pucks out of the corners and fed them to Dion, who established possession, and Simmer was the net front presence the line had needed all along. The Dion-Simmer-Taylor line took 12 shots that night and scored 5 goals. Dion had a legacy night with 4 goals in the 7-3 victory over his former club, the Red Wings. And they did it against Rogie Vachon, the goalie who had abandoned them in the offseason. But that's a different story. The Kings had scored just once in the 3 games before Simmer's arrival. Simmer made an immediate impact. Over his first 9 games, he recorded 10 points while scoring in 9 straight. Marcel Dion was held off the score sheet just 3 times the rest of the season. And even on those nights, Simmer and Taylor would pick up the slack. At least one of the trio scored in every single game to close out the year. By season's end, Simmer found his stride. In his final 9 games, he posted 10 goals and 10 assists. In time, they would be dubbed the Triple Crown line, and they would go down as one of the most successful in hockey history. Simmer would never face another minor league assignment again. That summer, Simmer signed a new contract with the Kings. At the time, he was happy with the deal. He was happy just to be out of the minors. It showed in his demeanor on and off the ice. He was never one to shy away from contact and was known to crack a smile after taking a good hit. In the locker room and on the bench, he was witty, relaxed, and well-liked. That year, Simmer registered the first of back-to-back 56-goal seasons, the first of which tied for the league lead. Simmer stayed humble and downplayed his accomplishments, joking that he was a garbage collector, banging in loose pucks around the goal mouth. His line mates disagreed. The three forwards complemented each other's styles perfectly. Each piece was essential to the line's success. Simmer's goal-mouth rummaging helped Dion win the Art Ross Trophy as NHL scoring leader in 1980. As quick as things were happening on the ice, they were happening even faster off it. In mid-October 1980, Simmer and roommate Glenn Goldup attended a Doobie Brothers concert with Goldup's playmate girlfriend and her best friend Terry Wells. Terry was also a playmate. Her and Charlie hit it off. By December, he proposed. She said yes. That January, the NHL All-Star Game was held in the Great Western Forum, and Simmer, Dion, and Taylor played together as a line to thunderous applause. Simmer, tall and handsome, an all-star with his playmate fiancée, who just 3 years earlier was mired in an often depressing, unappreciated existence in the minor leagues, was living a Hollywood fever dream. Then he caught a bad break. On a routine play in Toronto, he tried to turn and caught the tip of his skate blade on a rut in the ice. He crumpled immediately. A hospital visit revealed that he suffered a clean break of the fibula and a fracture of the tibia. His season was over. The Kings thought they could do real damage in the playoffs that year. They had 3 promising young blue liners, some complimentary scoring, an all-star goalie, and of course, the Triple Crown. Until they didn't. The Kings bowed out early again, reinforcing management's doubts about the lineup. Terry flew out to Toronto to visit Simmer, and the two got married months ahead of schedule. Doctors gave Simmer a year to return to the lineup. He did it in 8 months. Simmer came back sooner than anyone expected, but not as the same player. The leg had healed, with the help of 9 screws and a metal plate, but the timing and touch were off. He scored 15 goals in 50 games, then 29 the following season. Respectable numbers, but a far cry from the heights he had reached before the injury. By then, management had tinkered with the lineup, impatient with the results. They were a floundering team searching for footing in a crowded entertainment marketplace. What management failed to understand during that stretch was that the Triple Crown line was still something to build around. Simmer hadn't regressed. He was climbing again, once more proving himself to an organization that hesitated to believe in him. In 1983-84, the line was finally reunited full-time. Dave Taylor had been sidelined with a wrist injury for much of the previous season. The results were immediate. Simmer scored 44 goals and added 48 assists, leading the Kings in scoring and earning team MVP honors. That summer, Simmer wanted a new contract. He was still playing under a deal he'd signed before he was proven. He wasn't looking for a windfall, just recognition. He had been underpaid for years, playing through a maze of unsigned or rejected agreements. As the team's most productive winger and reigning MVP, he believed he had earned a modest raise. Ownership disagreed. Jerry Buss was unwilling to renegotiate, and new general manager Rogie Vachon found himself stuck in the middle. With his wife Terry at his side, Simmer chose to wait for the team to show him he was wanted. Eventually, he reported to camp and appeared in 5 of the Kings' first 7 games. The situation, however, was beyond repair. Los Angeles failed to win any of the games Simmer played, and the uncertainty hung over the room. Vachon traded Simmer to the Boston Bruins for a first-round pick. Perhaps the Kings were trying to recoup the losses suffered when they traded their first to Boston in 1979. The Kings selected Dan Gratton. It was an abrupt and unfitting end to one of the great scoring lines in hockey history. In Boston, Simmer continued to produce, scoring 33, 36, and 29 goals in 3 seasons there. Though that sounds like a decline, it's actually an impressive number for a former 50-goal scorer in his early 30s. The average goal total for a former 50-goal scorer in his age 31 season is 28. For age 32, that number declines to 24. By age 33, the average former 50-goal scorer has a 22-goal season. With that in mind, Simmer's numbers don't look like decline. They look like near Hall of Fame level consistency. Simmer's slow-footed net front presence style of play was uniquely suited to resist such a decline. But he was eventually waived and picked up by Pittsburgh, where his NHL career came to a close. He played briefly in Germany and San Diego of the International League. The marriage to Terry didn't last, another reminder that the Hollywood chapter had been all too brief. He finished with 711 points in 712 games and 342 goals. It's tempting to wonder what might have happened if Charlie Simmer had been recognized earlier, if the Seals had understood what they had, if the detours had been fewer. He might have hit milestones that change how careers are measured. Or he might have been misused all over again, never meeting Bob Barry, never landing on Marcel Dion's left wing, never becoming Charlie Simmer at all. Sometimes the long way around is the only way it works. Adam Sandler's Happy Gilmore was inspired by his childhood friend Kyle McDonough, a real hockey player who left the sport to chase golf. But hockey already had its own version of that story, one stranger than anything Sandler wrote. Todd Bergen quit the NHL to become a golfer, and because he never played another game, he retired with the highest goals per game average in league history. His sudden departure from the NHL was so shocking that no one could have seen it coming. Unlike most pro hockey players, Todd Bergen didn't play in an organized hockey league until he was 16 years old. 3 years later, by age 19, he stood 6'3" and had developed an accurate shot. The Philadelphia Flyers selected him in the draft. I won't reach for analogies. The odds of someone starting organized hockey at 16 and still being drafted into the NHL are vanishingly small. It is almost certainly unique in the history of the sport. It was also, as it turned out, a difficult fit. 2 years after being drafted, Bergen would score 50 goals in just 35 games as a junior for his hometown Prince Albert Raiders. He finished the year with 96 points in 43 games. The next year, he turned pro and joined the Philadelphia Flyers farm club in Hershey. He played well, scoring 20 goals in 38 games while taking only a single minor penalty, a profile that did not align with how the Flyers were built at the time. The 1985 Flyers were a veteran team built to contend, with balanced scoring and a deep defensive group. The organization was still shaped by its Broad Street Bullies past, even as former players had moved into leadership roles. Bobby Clarke was general manager. Bernie Parent worked as goaltending coach. Bill Barber finished the year behind the bench in Hershey. In January of 1985, Bergen was called up from Hershey. In his NHL debut against Vancouver, he scored twice, breaking the tie twice. The second goal stood up as the winner. In the following game, he took a pass off a face-off and fired an off-balance slap shot, immediately feeling pain in his abdomen. He stayed in the game. The severity of the injury was not recognized at the time, and there was skepticism within the organization about how serious it was. Bergen missed the next 2 months attempting to recover. Rehabilitation brought little improvement, and he was eventually pressed to return to the lineup. When he did, he scored a goal in each of his first 3 games back. Folks who had followed the Flyers for over a decade compared him to former Flyers All-Star Rick McClish for his natural abilities and killer shot. Somehow it didn't endear him to his coach, Iron Mike Keenan. He was labeled as a floater, lacking intensity and avoiding contact. Bergen had a real abdominal tear, the same injury that had sidelined Al Secord for nearly a season. But in Flyers culture, especially under Mike Keenan, injury was treated as attitude. Keenan doubled Bergen's workload, mocked the diagnosis, and kept teammates behind to ensure he finished every drill. Keenan told Bergen to his face that he believed he was either faking the injury or that it was psychosomatic. Bergen hadn't come from an institutional hockey background and wasn't inoculated to the kind of physical, mental, and emotional rigors of pro hockey. Bergen followed orders, but Keenan had lost him. Before long, Bergen was labeled as lackadaisical and described as having an attitude problem. His abdominal injury continued to factor into his play, but it was not treated as serious. After returning to the lineup, Keenan regularly directed sarcastic remarks toward him. Bergen later said the ongoing tension made it difficult for him to sleep. Coaching approaches in the NHL of the mid-1980s were often uncompromising. Under Mike Keenan, that approach was particularly evident in Philadelphia, and it was not confined to the coaching staff alone. Even as a young franchise, Philadelphia already had a history of mishandling injuries, rushing players back, or trading them while they were still hurt. Bergen was valued for his size, but his strengths lay in scoring rather than physical play, a contrast that shaped how he was viewed in Philadelphia. Bergen closed the season with goals in 4 straight games, finishing with 11 and 14. His final regular season game, 2 goals and an assist, marked the end of his NHL career. As a result, he still holds the highest goals per game rate of any player with more than 10 games played, higher than Bossy, Gretzky, or Ovechkin. The Flyers won all 14 games in which he appeared. In the playoffs, Bergen stayed productive. The Flyers made it all the way to the Stanley Cup final that year, where they lost to the Oilers. Bergen led all rookies in playoff scoring with 4 goals, 9 assists, and 13 points in 17 games. Entering the following season, Bergen was widely regarded as a leading candidate for the Calder Trophy. He appeared destined for stardom. That July, Bergen met with Keenan in Toronto to express his concerns. Keenan reiterated his expectations for hard work, dedication, and a strict training program. From the Flyers' perspective, Bergen had said his piece, and the organization believed the issue would simply blow over. When training camp opened, Bergen was a no-show. He had gotten permission from Keenan and Clark to report late to camp while he worked out what he called, quote, some personal problems. Bergen had reached out to Clark, telling him he didn't get along with the coach, and that he felt he didn't really fit in with the Flyers' culture, and quietly hoped for a trade. Clark passed off Bergen's concerns as the whims of a free spirit and decided to be patient with him. Bergen, meanwhile, continued to experience abdominal issues and did not believe he could endure a physically demanding training camp. By the 3rd week, Bergen had made up his mind. He announced he was going to quit hockey and try to play pro golf. Bergen had already asked for a trade and had decided he would not report to training camp under Keenan while still injured. When no trade followed, he announced that he was leaving hockey to pursue professional golf. The story was widely treated as novelty, framed as a player walking away rather than as leverage, and Bergen became the subject of jokes and criticism. Months later, he got his wish and was traded to the Minnesota North Stars. Bergen reported to camp immediately and re-aggravated the abdominal injury within days, this time on both sides. An MRI revealed scarring and damage far more extensive than anyone in Philadelphia had recognized. Minnesota diagnosed what Philadelphia never did. The North Stars tried 6 months of physical therapy, and when that failed, they turned to surgery. Bergen missed the entire 1985-86 season. When the following season rolled around, Bergen found himself back in the AHL, this time for Minnesota's affiliate, the Springfield Indians. He played 27 games and was still productive, notching 12 goals and 23 points. But Bergen remained embittered by his experience in Philadelphia. Minnesota declined to offer an extension, leaving Bergen a free agent with the option to sign anywhere he wished. He chose golf. Bergen didn't look back, refusing to so much as watch a hockey game for the next 10 years. Ultimately, he got into the fishing business and settled on beautiful Vancouver Island. Bergen's career illustrates how talent, timing, and environment do not always align. He did not have the temperament, support system, or cultural context that might have allowed the situation to resolve differently. When the 1986 season began, the Flyers moved on without him. They finished atop the Wales Conference with a top 5 offense and returned to the Stanley Cup final the following year, again facing Edmonton. The series went 7 games, ending in another narrow loss. Bergen would not have sustained his scoring pace had he remained. Still, the margin between the Flyers and a championship was small, and his departure left a question the record cannot answer.